At the height of its fame, counting cars looked like a roaring engine of success, but under the hood, something darker was brewing. Why did Danny Koker come to regret hiring some of his most trusted people? The roar of engines, the gleam of polished chrome, and the sight of a crew that seemed inseparable gave millions of viewers the illusion of harmony. Fans fell in love with the idea of a family bound by passion, welding sparks, and laughter echoing through the shop. Yet behind those garage doors, reality was far less polished. Over the years, Danny remained silent as one by one, familiar faces vanished from the show. He never explained, never pointed fingers, but the cracks couldn't stay hidden forever. This silence, this stubborn refusal to explain, was more than pride, it was pain. Because what happened in those years wasn't just about losing employees, it was about losing pieces of a dream he'd built with his own hands. The truth is, counting cars was always more than a television show. For Danny, it was a sanctuary for people who shared his vision. A brotherhood of grease, grit, and rock and roll. Viewers saw them ribbing each other over oil stains and celebrating gleaming finishes like they'd won championships. But what the cameras didn't catch, what they never wanted you to see, was how quickly egos could clash, how betrayal could creep in quietly, and how even the most loyal could falter under the weight of expectation. Danny's loyalty was his strength, but it became his weakness too. He handpicked his crew believing they shared his values: respect, honesty, obsession with perfection. And at first, they did. The team carried each other, pushed each other, and built miracles from rusted metal. But fame changes people. Money complicates love. Deadlines turn dreams into burdens. What started as a family began to feel like a circus, and not everyone could keep up. It wasn't just about mechanics failing to meet the mark. There were scandals that shook Danny's faith in ways he never admitted aloud. Some of the people he trusted most ended up staining his reputation, tearing holes in the fabric of everything he'd built. Others simply cracked under the weight of it all and drifted away without a word, leaving behind only rumors and silence. And as they disappeared, so too did the illusion of perfection that viewers had clung to. Now, after years of quiet reflection, Danny is ready perhaps not to forgive, but at least to speak. This is the story of 5 people he wishes he'd never hired. 5 names that still sting when he hears them. 5 departures that cut deeper than any dented fender or botched build. But to understand why these departures cut so deep, we have to start at the very beginning, with the man behind it all. Long before the television cameras rolled, Danny was just a kid in Detroit, learning about loyalty and machines in equal measure. But even then, cracks would appear in his faith in people. Growing up in the shadow of America's automotive capital, he watched his father, a man split between music and mechanics, move fluidly between a stage and a garage. That garage wasn't just a workspace, it was a sanctuary. A place where steel and oil could drown out life's noise, and where trust mattered more than talent. Danny learned early that a car could betray you if you didn't respect it, and that people were no different. He saw his father welcome neighbors into the garage, only to have a few walk out, owing more than they'd ever pay. But despite those small disappointments, Danny soaked up the lessons, standing next to his father's grease-stained hands as they turned broken things into beautiful ones. As he grew older, Detroit became less of a backdrop and more of a teacher. In that city of roaring engines and assembly lines, Danny developed not just a fascination for cars, but also a deep reverence for what they represented. Dedication, precision, permanence. Every bolt tightened felt like a promise. Every gleaming finish, a reward for loyalty to the craft. But it wasn't just the mechanics that shaped him. Music seeped into him from his father's performances. And Danny realized that a man could have more than one passion, more than one identity, as long as he stayed true to the values that anchored him. By the time most kids his age were thinking of first jobs, Danny was already known in his neighborhood as the boy who could make anything run again. Cars became his language, his way of connecting with people and proving himself. Yet, for all his enthusiasm, he carried a quiet resentment for those who took shortcuts. Every time he saw someone cut corners or disrespect the work, something hardened in him. He began to understand that mastery demanded both talent and loyalty, and that the wrong person in your circle could undo everything you built. When the time finally came for Danny to step out of his father's garage and into his own life, he carried those hard-won lessons with him. His dream evolved slowly, deliberately, until Count's Customs was born not just a shop, but an extension of his soul. He built it brick by brick, believing he could create a sanctuary for others who shared his devotion. And at first, it seemed like he had. People came, drawn to his vision, and he opened his doors wide, trusting that his passion would be enough to keep them together. But even then, as Count's Customs began transforming into more than just a garage into a brand, a beacon for enthusiasts and misfits alike, he couldn't ignore the quiet doubts that crept in. Because not everyone he welcomed lived up to the standard he'd learned in Detroit. Not everyone respected the craft the way he did. And not everyone believed loyalty was sacred. When Vegas fame arrived, the garage became more than a business, it became a stage. And not everyone could handle the spotlight. When fame hit, it brought more than fans and fortune. It brought egos, rivals, and unbearable pressure. What began as a quiet garage tucked away in the industrial veins of Las Vegas transformed almost overnight into something unrecognizable. Danny's alter ego, Count Coolrider, had already made him a local legend, a leather-clad, late-night host introducing horror flicks with a wink and a sneer. In those early days, his bandana and dark shades were a shield, a persona that allowed him to be both himself and untouchable. The city adored him. His name carries weight in small clubs, back alleys, and car shows. Yet even then, he kept one foot grounded in the garage. It was that balance between showman and craftsman that caught the attention of Pawn Stars. The Harrisons needed someone who not only understood classic cars, but embodied the city's rebellious spirit. Danny walked into their shop for a quick appraisal, but his edge and credibility stole the scene. Viewers noticed immediately. He was authentic, he was unpolished, and he spoke about cars the way most people speak about love. The producers noticed too, and with that, the offer came. In 2012, Counting Cars was born, spinning off into its own roaring machine. At first, it seemed perfect. Danny's garage became a sanctuary on television, a place where creativity thrived, where beat-up metal was reborn. But what viewers saw was only half the story. The cameras were both a blessing and a curse. As episodes aired and ratings climbed, the shop became a pilgrimage site for fans. They lined up outside. Tourists peeked through the windows. Customers, now watching from their living rooms, demanded impossible timelines, certain their orders deserved to be featured next. The quiet hum of machinery was drowned out by the buzz of microphones and the clatter of camera rigs. Worse, the producers began to stir the pot. Reality television thrives on drama, and they weren't content to let the natural conflicts play out. Minor disagreements were edited into explosions. Long hours were cut down into tense deadlines. Moments of fatigue became scenes of failure. Every week brought more pressure to deliver not just a flawless build, but a narrative worthy of prime time. And that pressure began to change the crew. Danny, already a perfectionist, pushed harder. His reputation was now global, and every mistake felt magnified. He scrutinized every panel, every weld, every coat of paint, with an intensity that some employees couldn't endure. What had once felt like a family began to crack under the weight of his expectations. Loyalty was tested, rivalries emerged, the crew's laughter gave way to silence, and beneath it all, resentment started to grow. And then the first cracks appeared in the form of a quiet betrayal that would leave Danny reeling. He was the quiet bookkeeper, the man trusted with every dollar. But his betrayal cost Danny far more than money. In a shop where trust was everything, Joseph Frontier seemed like the perfect fit. He kept to himself, spoke little, and handled the numbers with a calm confidence that reassured everyone. While the cameras fixated on gleaming chrome and roaring engines, Joseph worked in the shadows, ensuring the books balanced, and payroll never missed a beat. To Danny, he was indispensable as a silent guardian of the empire's lifeblood. Or so he believed. But beneath that unassuming exterior, Joseph was carving out his own twisted path. Over time, quiet discrepancies began to surface. Numbers that didn't add up, invoices that vanished, signatures Danny didn't remember signing. When the truth finally emerged, it hit like a wrecking ball. Joseph had stolen over $75,000 from Count's Customs. This wasn't petty theft. It was deliberate, calculated. He forged Danny's name on documents, rerouted company funds for personal luxuries, including a lavish down payment on a Range Rover and private airline tickets, all while maintaining his quiet, trustworthy facade. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Danny filed a lawsuit, not only naming Joseph but also the staffing agency that had placed him there. He claimed they failed to disclose crucial details about Joseph's past that, perhaps, should have raised alarms long before the first dollar was siphoned away. Fans who'd only known the shop as a brotherhood of craftsmen were stunned. The betrayal was bigger than any on-screen drama. It was personal, and it struck at the very heart of what Danny had built. Yet true to form, Danny chose silence. He never granted permission to the cameras, or staged a dramatic showdown. There was no public tirade or self-pitying interview. Instead, he tightened his circle and shouldered the humiliation quietly. But those close to him saw the toll it took. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, that once broken could never be fully restored. And then, just as suddenly as he'd arrived, Joseph disappeared. No apologies, no explanations, no public statements. He vanished so completely, it was as though he'd never existed at all, leaving behind only whispers and a bitter lesson for everyone watching. But Joseph wasn't the only one to leave Danny questioning his judgment. Next came a man who clashed with him head-on, and vanished just as abruptly. He was blunt, strict, and clashed with Danny often, but he kept the chaos in check. Then, without a word, he was gone. Scott Jones was never the kind of man to fade quietly into the background. In a shop full of big personalities and louder machines, he stood out not because he wanted to, but because he had to. As the shop manager and financial watchdog, he became the unflinching force keeping the garage from slipping into chaos. Where others were dreamers and artists, Scott was the enforcer, the one reminding everyone that passion didn't pay bills and deadlines didn't wait for inspiration. From the moment he appeared on screen, his dynamic with Danny was electric, and not always in a good way. While Danny pushed forward with his gut and his vision, Scott kept his eyes on the bottom line, often dragging his boss back to reality with cold numbers and tighter budgets. Viewers watched them argue openly. Scott would warn that they were bleeding money. Danny would counter with fiery defiance. The tension between them became a cornerstone of those early seasons. An honest clash between art and accounting, between vision and survival. But then, after season 2, he was gone. No farewell, no explanation, no final handshake in front of the cameras. One day he was there, laying down the law over budgets and timelines, and the next, his desk sat empty, and his name was erased from the narrative. Fans noticed immediately, and speculated wildly. Some whispered that he'd crossed a line, mismanaged money, or even betrayed the trust of the man he'd spent years defending against chaos. Yet, for all the noise, no proof of wrongdoing ever surfaced. There was no lawsuit, no police report, nothing concrete to explain the sudden silence. Instead, Scott simply reappeared years later, far from the bright lights and tension of Las Vegas. He moved to Tennessee, where he opened his own high-performance automotive shop, and eventually resurfaced on Netflix's Swap Shop. It was a quiet re-emergence, almost defiant in its normalcy, as if to prove he'd walked away on his own terms, or at least without the scandal fans imagined. And still, neither Danny nor Scott has ever spoken publicly about what really happened. The truth remains locked between them, a private rift that neither man seems willing to revisit. But for those who watched him hold the garage together in its most fragile years, his sudden departure felt like more than just another exit. It felt like the end of an era when reality still clung to loyalty, and the show still believed in the family it portrayed. While Scott's exit was quiet yet tense, the next departure was heartbreaking and clouded in mystery. He was the heart and laughter of the shop until tragedy and silence swallowed him whole. For years, Rolly Sabo was more than just a detailer. He was the pulse of the garage, the man who could turn even the most stressful day into something bearable. Fans knew him as Rock and Rolly, and that nickname said everything. With his thick Hungarian accent, his infectious laugh, and his knack for finding humor in the hardest moments, he kept spirits high while polishing cars to perfection. In a place where deadlines loomed and tempers flared, Rolly reminded everyone to breathe and to laugh. He wasn't just loved by the team, he was adored by the audience who saw him as proof that the garage wasn't only about business. But behind that constant grin was a man who carried his own struggles. And when tragedy struck, his light began to dim. In 2017, everything changed when his trailer filled with thousands of dollars in specialized detailing equipment was stolen. For someone like Rolly, whose craft depended on those tools, the theft was more than a loss of property. It was a gut punch that shattered his confidence and left him defeated. He posted about it briefly, his frustration and heartbreak spilling out into the open. But after that, he fell silent. By the time season 6 ended, Rolly was gone. There was no goodbye, no explanation, just another name absent from the credits. Fans noticed immediately, and rumors filled the void. Some said he'd clashed with other staff. Others speculated that the theft had broken something inside him, that the grind of fame, the weight of deadlines, and the pressure of being the comic relief had finally taken their toll. Unlike others before him, though, Rowley left without scandal. There were no lawsuits, no bitter statements, no legal battles, only silence and a lingering sense of loss. But Rowley wasn't done. Far from it. Away from the cameras, he began again. Slowly, quietly, he built his own business, Rock and Rowley Custom Detailing, a mobile service in Las Vegas that catered to loyal clients who valued his unmatched skill. Without the glare of the spotlight, he rediscovered the craft that had once brought him joy. His reputation for meticulous work endured, and his loyal following proved that even out of sight, he had not been forgotten. From the life of the party to the soul of the garage, the next name to fade away left fans even more puzzled. He spoke through his art as a master of motorcycles, whose silence spoke volumes when he quietly walked away. Shannon Akow was not the loudest man in the room, nor did he need to be. His language was the whir of tools, the gleam of custom chrome, and the roar of engines brought to life by his hands. In a garage full of personalities that demanded attention, Shannon stood apart, calm, focused, and undeniably brilliant. His builds weren't just machines, they were statements. Each one a testament to a craftsman who understood that real beauty often required restraint. Fans came to recognize his signature style, the way he could make even the most ordinary bike into a work of art. And in those early seasons, his presence felt like the steady heartbeat of Count's Customs. But as the cameras kept rolling, and the show leaned deeper into drama and spectacle, Shannon began to fade into the background. At first, his appearances became shorter, a glimpse here, a quiet nod there, and then whole episodes went by without him at all. For a man who had shaped some of the shop's most iconic builds, his absence was glaring. Viewers began to speculate about what was happening behind the scenes. Had he grown tired of the cameras? Or was it something deeper, a clash of creative visions that left him unwilling to play along anymore? The whispers grew louder as the seasons passed. Some believed Shannon resisted the push toward flashy builds, designed to impress television audiences rather than honor the artistry he believed in. Others claimed he refused to compromise his standards just to satisfy production deadlines and contrived storylines. Whatever the reason, he never made a scene. There were no confrontations, no bitter words, no accusations hurled into the public arena. Instead, he simply stepped away, his quiet exit, mirroring the quiet dignity with which he had always worked. Yet leaving the show did not mean abandoning his craft. Far from it. Shannon remained active in the Las Vegas motorcycle scene, still building, still innovating, still perfecting his art without the burden of television's demands. He appeared occasionally at events and trade shows, his name still spoken with respect by those who understood the discipline and vision he brought to his work. Through it all, he never spoke ill of the shop, never revealed his reasons for leaving, and never sought attention for himself. And finally, the most colorful of them all, was a man whose artistry and ego clashed with Danny's vision until something had to give. He wore his rebellion on his head, but behind the mohawk and flames was a storm brewing between creativity and control. Horny Mike was impossible to ignore. In a shop full of quiet craftsmen and seasoned mechanics, he stood out like a neon sign at midnight. With his signature spiked helmet, wild energy, and airbrushed masterpieces that blurred the line between madness and genius, Mike became not just a part of the shop, but one of its most recognizable faces. Fans loved his unpredictability, his wit, and his refusal to fit any mold. To the outside world, he was the shop's rock star, and to Mike, that was exactly the point. But underneath the vibrant colors and brash confidence was a relentless struggle to reconcile two competing forces: his desire for artistic freedom and Danny's need for precision, order, and brand integrity. At first, their partnership thrived on tension. Mike's airbrushed designs became a calling card for the shop, helping it stand out in a crowded world of custom builds. He turned cars, bikes, and even helmets into moving canvases, each one stamped with his unapologetic style. Yet as the cameras rolled and the stakes grew higher, their differences began to show. Danny wanted beauty but also discipline. Mike wanted chaos and complete creative control. What had started as friendly debates over designs escalated into quiet frustration. Mike grew weary of the demands imposed by television, the scripted deadlines, the artificial drama, the constant expectation to deliver outrageous designs under impossible timeframes. While Danny worried about customers, deadlines, and brand reputation, Mike bristled against the growing constraints, seeing them as a cage for his creativity. The very fame that had made him beloved now began to suffocate him. Slowly, Mike began retreating. His appearances became less frequent, his energy less volatile. He focused more on his own business, Horny Mike Designs, where he could unleash his creativity without interference. His custom airbrushed gear, motorcycle helmets, and surreal creations became a hit in their own right, proving he didn't need the shop to thrive. But despite the tension, Mike never disrespected what Count's Customs had given him. Even as he carved his own path, he continued to speak of the garage and of Danny, with a kind of rugged admiration, acknowledging it as the place that had given him his start and taught him how far his art could reach. These 5 names each left scars on Danny's dream, but also left him with hard-earned lessons about loyalty, trust, and fame. Behind the roaring engines and gleaming chrome lies a truth Danny has carried quietly. Some mistakes you only see in the rearview mirror. The years of fame, pressure, and betrayal left their mark not just on the garage, but on Danny himself. When the cameras first arrived, he believed the spotlight would simply illuminate what was already there: passion, loyalty, and hard work. But what it revealed instead was how fragile those ideals could become when tested by fame. The glare exposed cracks that no polish could hide. Employees who once felt like family became rivals. Trust that once seemed unshakable was broken, and moments of joy were replaced by quiet questions about who would walk out next. Betrayal has a way of reshaping a man. Danny learned this lesson slowly, painfully, one exit at a time. Joseph's theft wounded his pride and stripped away his sense of security. Scott's sudden departure left him questioning his own leadership. Rolly's silence after the theft of his trailer, Shannon's quiet retreat. Mike's struggle to balance artistry with reality, each one a scar Danny would carry, a reminder of just how much could go wrong when loyalty is taken for granted. Yet through it all, he never lashed out publicly. His silence was not weakness but a deliberate refusal to fuel the gossip, to cheapen what had once been sacred by airing it for the world to see. Instead, he rebuilt. Every departure was painful, but everyone also forced the shop to adapt. New hands came in, new stories began. The garage remained a sanctuary for cars and craftsmen alike. Fans continued to line up, and clients still trusted Count's Customs to turn their dreams into reality. Danny refused to let bitterness define him or his business, even as the ghosts of what had been lingered in the corners of his memory. And now, with decades of experience behind him, he can look back at those mistakes and finally see them for what they were: lessons disguised as losses. Fame can cloud your judgment. Trust can be misplaced. Even the strongest teams can crumble. But the garage stands, and so does he. So here's the question: what would you have done in his place? When trust was broken, when dreams cracked under the weight of expectation, when the people you believed in walked away, would you have found the strength to keep building? Or would you have let it all rust away? Because in the world of custom cars and custom people, it's not just the builds that carry scars. It's the builder, too. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.